Welcome to I Said What I Said, a sports podcast giving you opinions not heard anywhere else. I'm your host, Brad Wakai, alongside my co-host, Tyson Gentry. And Tyson, we're recording the SEC preview episode today. This is going to be released on Sunday. So week 0 will already be under the belt. Hopefully we started off with some winners. And just to get everything going, I don't know how much we are going to play or not. We're recording this after the SEC preview, but this is our last preview series. So before week 1, if you're wondering and looking for some last second bets, go and check that out. It's all in the podcast feed. It's all on YouTube. But every single year we've done this, we've saved the SEC for last. I'm the Big Ten guy. You're the SEC guy. I know you're pumped to get into this one.
Yeah, I'm the SEC guy in the sense that my favorite college football team plays in the SEC. I don't know if I'm overall a giant fan of the conference, but it just means more in this conference, Brad. And what that means is we just get juicier storylines, and this is what kind of drives in some clicks. So we have to save it for last. Luckily, none of these teams are playing in week 0, so it doesn't really affect anything as far as our preview stuff goes. We will have a week 0 preview betting show coming out before those games. So if you're really locked in on Florida State, Georgia Tech, or whatever else, we'll give our opinions there. But this is all about, come on, Paul. This is what we're doing today. This is SEC ball, baby.
So if this is your first time tuning in, what we're going to do is talk about the conference as a whole, just kind of give our thoughts, go through each team alphabetically, just talking about kind of breakdowns, what we expect from the team. And then at the end, we got Money Makin Time. We're going to put together our best bets on the win total. We're going to give you our one conference winner, and then we'll get out of here, and we're going to start prepping for week 1 in college football. So as we move into the SEC, Tyson, when I was doing my prep, it's a lot of interesting stuff here because a lot of the other conferences, there are quarterbacks who are having first years at this level or first years with the program. That's not really the case with the SEC. And I think that's going to create a good product, and it's going to create something where there is a lot of parity.
Does it feel weird a little bit to know that the SEC has experienced quarterback play and most of these dudes are good?
Yeah, that's kind of that's like the antithesis. It used to be
exactly.
Like experience, and they were just running the system. But now these guys are going to the NFL.
No, they're all going to the NFL. Some of these guys are not going to the NFL, people. I can tell you right now, I don't expect Jalen Milroe to be a fantastic NFL quarterback, but God damn it, is that guy fun to watch play college football. They've got a good mix of, like, Carson Beck might be the number 1 pick overall next year, coming from Georgia. And then we know what we're getting from the skill position guys, from the defensive players. We're going to not talking generalities, but a lot of the SEC conversation is the same year over year. It's like, yeah, well, they replaced everybody with 5 stars.
So let's get into Alabama and Jalen Milroe. Nick Saban's gone. I don't know if you guys knew that. If you're living under a rock, Nick Saban is no longer the head coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide. They're coming off a 12-2 year. They shocked Georgia in the SEC championship game, prevented them from going into the college football playoff and going for a three-peat. They lost in the semifinal to Michigan on a crazy, crazy ending and a crazy game. But they get Kalen DeBoer over here, got him away from Washington after he was in the championship game. And there was expected to be a frenzy of players leaving this program, and DeBoer and his staff did a really good job of holding on to him. Now, they lost a couple top-end guys, but they were able to hold on to a good amount. So with all that being said, 7 returning starters, 6 on defense, or 7 on offense, 6 on defense, 95th in returning production, offensive yards back 57.1%. Tackles back is a little bit lower, 41.8%. That's 114th in the country. And shockingly here, 60 offensive line starts. That's 93rd in the country. Now, again, like Tyson mentioned, this is a team that recruits extremely well. It's a program that has recruited extremely well. So when you're losing players, a lot of times you have the pedigree to back it up. I think here is where it gets a little dicey in the first year, though, because at least Saban kind of knew and his staff knew who exactly they could tab and be like, you're filling in for this spot when this guy leaves. The board probably will get there in a few years, but I think right now, this is the time where we can't necessarily put our heads down and say, the returning production doesn't matter for Alabama. And then when you combine in their 9th toughest schedule, this could be the diciest year we've seen for the Crimson Tide had in a while.
I'm not falling for any of that, man. I think this team's still going to be good. I like Kalen DeBoer quite a bit. I think the biggest thing here for Alabama, to me, we knew for the last 2 decades, essentially, or the better part of them, that if the floor fell out, they were going to win 9 games or they're going to win 10 games and they're going to look just fine. They're going to beat good teams. We don't know what it looks like if the floor falls out underneath Kalen DeBoer. Not that the talent has changed at all, but there is something to be said from going from the GOAT, the greatest of all time in college football, to a really good head coach. This is the first time in the better part of 2 decades where they don't have the best head coach in the SEC. They don't have the best coaching staff in the SEC. And maybe they do. Maybe Kalen DeBoer is that guy, and we're going to find that out. I mean, he just took a Washington team to the national championship after being there for a week. Like, he turned that thing around super quickly. The defense is kind of going to be the bigger question mark to me. I think Kalen DeBoer is going to do some really fun stuff with Milroe and with this offense. Like, you lose Isaiah Bond to Texas, that's okay. We got a stable of guys here that we can turn around and hand the ball off to. You lose Jermaine Burton to the NFL. Well, Brad, we've been having the same conversation for 3 years now. Like, Alabama doesn't have the wideouts. And then all of a sudden you look up at the end of the year, they won 10 games and they did it their way. We'll see what DeBoer can do there. Losing Dallas Turner is huge. Seems like another annual conversation we have with Alabama. It's like, oh, first-round edge rusher gone. Who's going to replace him? It's different now, like without Steele, without Saban in the building, to see who they're going to replace him. And it's Womack, right? Kane Womack is the new defensive coordinator here. Look for him to kind of put his stamp on things, I guess, a little bit, or at least do things his own way. I think that as far as jobs to walk into, taking over the talent on the Alabama defense is a pretty good one to have. And they got some transfers to help out with the secondary. I don't expect Alabama to take a massive step back, but as we talked about when DeBoer took the job, is 9 wins good enough? Is 10 wins good enough? Because this is a fan base that is used to going to the playoffs and winning national championships. And I think his grace period is shorter than somebody, Jimbo Fisher had at A&M.
Yeah, and I think especially when you consider the NIL money that's been thrown around at the South, like Tyson kind of said,
are you saying Bama's spending money?
Well, one of the things, they are a little behind in NIL.
Yeah,
they're behind. I think they're trying to catch up. But before it was, Nick Saban was just able to go into any living room in the country and be like, I'm Nick Saban, put his rings on the table and say, come play for me. And you're
put his rings in $500,000 and then offer your mom a job in the athletic department. That's how I got half these kids into school.
And now that, you can legally do it, first of all, and Alabama's a little bit behind on their NIL structure. You've seen these teams in the South start to be able to build and recruit well, like Missouri under Eli Drinkwitz we'll talk about. They've started recruiting well. Hugh Freeze down in Auburn, that's going to be tough. There's going to be kids who are going to Auburn over Alabama now. So keep an eye on that. Now, we both like the DeBoer hire. I'm curious to know how long it's going to take to get this plane off the runway. Could be quick, could be a little bit. And if that's the case, how long of the leash does he have, just like Tyson said. But let's get into Arkansas, because talk about a short leash here. I mean, if this is a disaster early, Sam Pitten's fired. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. They brought in Bobby Petrino to be the offensive coordinator, and I think the thinking was, if this is a wreck, we got a guy who's ready to take over. Pittman's been here this will be his 5th season. He's 23-25. Started off the tenure really good, actually. I think there's a lot of positivity. And it just doesn't look like he's prepared for this, or it doesn't look like he's a good enough coach to coach in the SEC against these top programs. They did get Taylon Green, the Boise State transfer. He was really good about 2 years ago when it was like, holy smokes, this guy looks like he's, the best they've had at Boise State in a long time. And then last year he fell off a cliff. Like, I don't know if it was because Dirk Cutter was gone or what the case was, but he just wasn't the same player. So we'll see what he does. We talk about a jump for previous guys. What does he do in this conference now? Now you're playing SEC. Like, if you struggled in the Mountain West, what are you doing here? But 9 returning offensive starters, 8 on defense, but still they're 88th in returning production, right? So 48.7% of their yards are back on offense. On defense, 46.6% of their tackles are back, 101st in the country. That suggests that that's a little worrisome for me. Now, can they win shootouts with Bobby Petrino and Taylon Green, just drawing things up? Potentially, but 62 offensive line starts, it signals to me that they could get pushed around in the trenches a bit. And then you combine in the fact they have the 18th toughest schedule. And I think this is the last year that Pittman coaches in Arkansas.
I mean, it's 3.5 yards a carry a year ago, and like 48 sacks, 40-some sacks, 50 sacks, whatever it was. And yeah, KJ Jefferson might have played his way into a couple of those. So you take a couple away, that's still 40 sacks on the season. That's not good enough. and it's not going to be good enough. I think Taylor Green is a good college quarterback. I think Bobby Petrino, we've seen, time and time again throughout his career that he's a really good offensive coordinator. I just kind of feels like, looking out the side of his eyes right now, like I'm gonna take this head coaching job over. Like I'm back. This is what we do. That's fully what I'm expecting from an Arkansas team. I think that they finish really close to the Vanderbilts and the Mississippi States here at the bottom of the conference. They got some impact transfers, but again, like when you are Arkansas, your impact transfers are Jackson from Utah comes in and he's going to play running back. That's good. 9 other teams in the SEC are pulling in better talent than you, and that's just where Arkansas is, and as a program. There was some really, really fun Arkansas years when we were growing up. We had the Darren McFadden years, the Peyton Hillis years, Felix Jones,
Ryan Mallett,
6'7", slinging that thing around. But it's been a long time since Arkansas has been really fun. We've had high expectations a few times, and you mentioned kind of the fall off that they've had since this job was taken over in 2021. Brett, they haven't won a conference game since they started 4-4. They're 4-12 now in this tenure. They started 9-4 overall. I think they're like, what is it? What is his overall record again? I apologize.
23-25.
Yeah, and I think they started 9-4 year one. So we're talking about a solid downward trajectory, and then kind of the guy who was really riding the ship and making a lot of these guys' dumb decisions look better is playing at UCF now. And so it's going to be very interesting for Arkansas. I think it's another year at the bottom of the barrel.
And if you're hearing lightning and thunder, I apologize here. I mean, it's dumping here in Phoenix. I mean, it was been kind of flirting with that for a while. So if you're hearing that and there's poor connection, I'm sorry. Like finally the monsoon, they said it was monsoon season. We're getting it. So just keep that in mind when you're listening here. But let's move on to Auburn. I'm super excited. I've been a Hugh Freeze fan for a long time, and I know his first tenure at Ole Miss, it ended sourly. Let's just put it that way, for inappropriate actions, things like that. But the guy's a really good football coach. Proved it at Auburn. At Liberty. Had a second chance here at Auburn. Last year they went 6-7. In the first year after that disaster, that Brian Harsin that he left behind, really impressive. But Tyson, they're running Peyton Thorne back out there. And I watched him at Michigan State, and I watched him last year. He's just not anything to get excited about. It's only 1,700 yards last year, 61% completion, 16 touchdowns, 10 picks. He's going to be a senior. You got to take the next step. Like, if you can't do that in the Hugh Freeze offense, there's just no hope. I'm curious to know who they go big game hunting after. They got some recruits in. I don't think anybody on this roster is really who Hugh Freeze is eyeing to get them to the next level. But if we're talking in terms of what they can do this year, 9 offensive returning starters, 8 on defense are back, 44th in returning production, 84.6% of their offensive yards are back. That's 12th in the country. 55.1% of their tackles are back. 87 offensive line starts. That's 57th in the country. So good metrics on that front. Plus, this might be the best wide receiver room in the entire country when you go from top to bottom.
You're tripping.
They love the freshman kid that they have coming in.
You're just saying that because Keandre Lambert-Smith came over from Penn State.
No, that was a very, very good divorce. That's one of those ones when you're buddy and you just know it's not going to work out and you're like, oh, what took it so long? Yeah, that was that situation. But 56 toughest schedule here. He kind of gets a bone here. Hugh Freeze does. This is a time that they could potentially make some noise. Tyson, I just think they're going to be held back by the quarterback situation.
And the freshman receiver you mentioned is Cam Coleman. Everyone in the country is going to be very, very familiar with this kid very soon. I mean, we're talking about Jeremiah Smith, and we're talking about some of these other guys. Cam Coleman is right up there. I think Jeremiah Smith was like the 7th highest rated recruit of all time. And so you get buried a little bit, but this is like a true stud that Auburn gets in the building here. Brad, you got through this whole thing without mentioning your boy, DJ Durkin, taking over the defense. I mean, this is like, he doesn't inherit a ton of talent. Obviously, I think it's like 5 total starters. I missed exactly what you said there that they have coming back on the defensive side of the football. But Hugh Freeze taking over play calling duties. We know that's going to be fun in Auburn here. We know kind of what we're getting a little bit. We saw it through the first 10 games last year, but they lost to New Mexico State. And then they lost to Bama, and then they lost to Maryland. All boom, boom, boom. That's a horrible way to end a season, especially one when you want positive momentum going into year 2 of this thing. And so to kind of end the season on a thud, the way that they did isn't great. I expect Auburn, and get this, folks, they're going to be frisky. That's Auburn football.
Let's get to Florida.
That's
you. Yeah, that's good. Oh boy, man. So Billy Napier is entering his third season since taking over this job after leaving ULL. Well, we loved him in the Sun Belt, right? Sun Belt Billy.
He sucks.
Here's the problem. This might be the best team that he's had since taking over. And they have like probably the hardest schedule in the history of college football.
Yeah,
I mean, it's unbelievably hard. Go look at it. Like they don't have a single easy game on their schedule. So Graham Mertz is coming back. That's the only shining light here. And it's not like he's a great quarterback by any stretch, Tyson, but almost 3,000 yards, 73% completion percentage, 20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Now you'd like him to be a little bit more aggressive pushing the ball down the field, but if he's healthy and upright, like he's not going to make mistakes and he's going to be able to run this thing. 52nd returning production, 69.5% of their offensive yards are back. That's 36 in the country. That's a good start there. Defensively, they have 60.7% of their tackles back and 80 offensive line starts, kind of a middling number. That's 63rd in the country. Still, there's a foundation here. And when we talk about Billy Napier and what he did at Louisiana, like it was great. It was really good. And you kind of thought that it was going to happen here. Florida, of course, because they're a disaster, gets impatient and they're like, well, we hired you to this contract so you could recruit and build through that way. But actually, we don't like losing, so we're thinking about firing you. It's like you guys can't have it both ways here. So that's all pushed back a little bit. But if he gets to a bowl game, I'll just say this. If he wins 6 games and gets to a bowl game, give this guy Coach of the Year award. I mean, holy smokes, this schedule is ridiculous.
Well, let's just go, and we can skip the beginning, but like they catch Stanford in week 1. Who cares about that? And you can skip most of September. Once we get into October, Brad, I don't know if they're winning a game like on paper, and we know we don't play the games on paper, but you go UCF, Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, Florida State. Like Kentucky Crazy. Is the worst team in that group there, and there's a chance that they find themselves ranked within the top 25 by the time that game's going on. It's going to be really tough. You're familiar with the biggest transfer I think that they got in is Joey Slackman, the Penn State defensive lineman that they get over here. So that'll be like good. This is a defense that stunk a year ago. Everybody scored 5 touchdowns on these guys. That has to be better. But Florida has been doing this. Auburn's been doing the same thing. Tennessee was doing it for a while, where they are just, hey, you get 2 years. And if you don't figure it out in 2 years, this thing, you're done and we're going to go find somebody else. We thought when they go out and they get Billy football, they get Billy Napier, that this was going to be like a soft reset into a real build. And just like the smoke around Florida right now seems to be, oh, this is it. Like you got to at least do something here to prove that you can keep your job. Not the way that we necessarily would go about this thing, but he has shown like they've lost games they should have won against good competition, games they were winning, and games that they gave away. I'm not super interested in Graham Mertz. I don't care so much one way or the other as far as like him as a football player. I think he does just enough where Florida's not going to turn the ball over and shoot themselves in the foot, which is a positive step. But again, I think that Florida just kind of finds themselves in that weird spot in college football where there's a huge brand, but how many 6-win seasons can you survive until your brand takes a dump too?
Keep an eye out on DJ Lagway, 5-star quarterback. If Graham Mertz gets hurt, if Graham Mertz struggles, I don't know if Billy Napier is going to be hesitant to pull the trigger on that and see what he can do.
If his job is on the line, you got to throw a kid in the game.
Keep an eye out for that. Okay, Georgia, the favorite here, and this is why, Kirby Smart, my guy. First of all, I can't believe it's the 9th season he's been here already.
Isn't it crazy? I was just running through it. Record. When we were talking about Florida, I started thinking about Mark Richt, and then I was like, Kirby Smart's been in Georgia for a decade. That's crazy.
It's insane. Carson Beck's back, almost threw for 4,000 yards last year, 72% completion percentage, 24 touchdowns, 6 picks. Guy's probably going to be the number 1 overall pick in the draft. If that wasn't an advantage enough for what we've seen Georgia do, they are 26th in returning production. Offensively, 79.3% of their yards are back. And that's without Brock Bowers, and that's without Ladd McConkey. That's 21st in the country. Now, defensively, 59.9% of their tackles are back. Who cares? This is Kirby Smart. This is his defense. You got 5 stars all over the place. Offensive line, 80 offensive line starts, 63rd in the country. All right, nothing crazy. Now Phil Steele has them as the 8th toughest schedule. Does that matter for a team like this? We'll see. I mean, I think they're going to steamroll a lot of the opponents, if not all of them. I'm just wondering, how much is Carson Beck going to play? Like, do they want to give him a Heisman and they just demolish people? Or are they going to pull him out in like the second quarter and be like, dude, let's save it?
That'll be interesting to follow, because I do think that they're going to be up. They're going to Warriors people. It's going to be, let's sit in the third quarter, high five each other on the bench. If you could point to a down spot, I guess like it's the fact that Georgia didn't make the playoff a year ago, and you can say what you want about that. I think they would have won the national championship had they got in. They didn't. They didn't deserve to be there. They lost the SEC championship game. That's how the chips fell. It was probably the rushing defense, right? I mean, it was over 100 yards a game, which is like sacrilegious for these Kirby Smart teams and their defenses. I expect them to get closer to maybe not 77 yards a game like it was in 2022, 2023. Like that was we do this all the time with SEC schools. Best defense of all time, but Georgia had a couple that are up there for that. Let's look for Ra Thomas, look for Levitt, look for some of these guys to take the next step into the like household name conversation because they're really good players. They've just been buried behind first and second round picks. And Georgia does my favorite thing in all of college football when it comes to the transfer portal, where they go out and they look at Florida and they go, Trevor Etienne's probably like your best guy. We'll take him. And then they look around at Vanderbilt and they go, well, I don't know. Let's take London Humphreys, right? And then they go to Miami and they grab a guy from there. But they get to pick who they get to be really selective about the all-stars they bring in. How many times do we Georgia is going to – if Georgia doesn't make the playoffs this year, what has to happen? It's more than a quarterback injury.
I mean, maybe the stadium falls apart.
That's it. The football team has to cease to exist. They have to get the death penalty by week 7 in order for this team to make the playoffs. And if they're in, when we know the way Kirby Smart talks and kind of riles these guys up as far as nobody believes in us and we're doing this, call it brainwashing, call it what you want. Georgia will be playing when it matters, and that's a scary thing for the rest of the country.
So Kentucky, they still have Mark Stoops. This is going to be his 12th season here. He's actually done a really good job. 73-65 at this program is remarkable. He almost went to Texas A&M. It was like the weird thing where he was announced to be hired or he announced he was leaving, and all of a sudden, I don't know if the deal fell through on the Aggie side or if Stoops pulled back. I don't know what happened, but he's back here.
The boosters got mad from A&M.
Maybe. Yeah.
Isn't that the whole thing?
I mean, I don't know. It was strange all around, but Brock Vandergriff, speaking of Georgia, is going to be the quarterback here. This is his first season. He didn't get a lot of action at Georgia, so he's coming over to try to play a little bit more. This is an intriguing Kentucky team because they have a lot of returners back. Now, they're 34th in overall production. Not really the case on offense. 27.3% of their yards are back. That's 111th in the country. So keep an eye on that. But on defensively, Stoops specialty, 76.9%. That's 14th in the country. And then the offensive line, 156 starts. That is 6th in the country. That is a great sign. If you want to build through the run, if you want to dominate, if you want to give Vandergriff some time to throw, that's great. 24th toughest schedule in the country. Listen, if you're going to play SEC schools, that's going to get boosted up a little bit. So kind of expect that when you hear 24 through 30. Okay, that's kind of standard, right? Like they're playing like an average
when
schedule.
You put Georgia on the schedule, you go up 50 spots.
Right. So this is an intriguing team this year. Now, Vandegrift is the wild card, right? Like we have no clue how he's going to do. Like we just haven't been exposed to him enough. But I think if he can play well and operate this offense, this defense should give them enough to hang in the game. It's just what they can do on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and I think Brown is a good player at wide receiver. I think Key's a good player at wide receiver. You lose Ray Davis, who was he 25 years old in college football, kind of like a guy who can right the ship and steady everybody else. But you bring in the dude from Ohio State, Trayan Man, I think is how, I don't know exactly how you say his name, but it's a running back who basically got squeezed out by Quinshon Judkins. He's going to come in and take this over.
Travion?
Yes. Let's
Travion Henderson.
No, the Kentucky running back. It's Chip Trayan.
Chip Trayanum.
Train Yes, I just butchered. There's too many A's for me. But we're talking about the schedule, Brad, and it just makes no sense to me. Like you start out with Southern Miss, and that's fine. But then from there, it's an on week, off week, right? It's South Carolina, and then it's Georgia, and then it's Ohio, and then it's Ole Miss, and then it's Vanderbilt, and then it's Florida, and then it's Auburn, and then it's Tennessee, Murray State, Texas. And so it's like, on one hand, you can't slip up on the games you're supposed to win, but you kind of have to have an eye towards the Texas game and an eye towards the Georgia game. And I think those things will get interesting. Let's see how Stoops handles this whole thing, because like having a meeting with your team, I love you guys, but I'm gone. And then you show back up to work on Monday. Let's see how that plays.
Yeah, it's a weird situation all around. This is Tyson's team, LSU. I'm going to give him the runway here. Just going to go through a couple things first. This is Brian Kelly's third season. They went 10-3 last year. Jaden Daniels won the Heisman Trophy. Defensively, they were a disaster. Is that going to be improved? But overall, I think it's been a successful tenure so far, 20-7. They beat Alabama in his first season. People hate this guy. I mean, listen, you can hate him all you want. He's a really good football coach. Now, Garrett Nussmeier takes over. This is going to be his first season. I commend him for staying, because he could have transferred multiple times, and now he's going to get a shot under Brian Kelly in this offense. And he's going to have an opportunity to potentially be a first-round draft pick if he plays well. So keep that in mind here. That's the type of talent he is. But naturally, when you lose a bunch of the players from last year's team, your returning production is going to sink. And that's the case here. 99th overall in returning production. Offensively, only 23.4% of their yards are back, which is 118th. Now, Daniels is gone. Malik Neighbors is gone. You kind of expect that. 66.5% of their tackles are back. That's 40th. Is that the good type of the defense? Is that the bad type of the defense, right? Because you want consistency, you want continuity, but they were so bad last year. Kind of take that with a grain of salt. But LSU might have the best offensive line in the country this year. They got 111 offensive starts. Offensive line starts. That's 31st in the country. 2 probable first-round tackles
Top 10
on the bookends. So that's something to keep in mind. And then 26, toughest schedule. Tyson will go through a little bit more of what he thinks on this. But, arrows are pointing up for Kelly here. It's just, can he break through and get to that next level?
Yeah, and you mentioned the offensive line a little bit. Like Will Campbell, if there's not going to be a quarterback that goes number one in the NFL draft, it's going to be this guy. And, like, that's the way the NFL has told us. Like, this is what we want. Emory Jones is the other tackle. He's a really good player as well. The concern, I think, there's a couple always with Brian Kelly teams, but you lose Denbrock to Notre Dame, and that's a huge loss. Number one overall offense in college football last year. They promote from within with Joe Sloan, so you think things will be pretty close to the same. You lose Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors on the outside. It's the same song and dance for LSU football as it is every year. Like, oh, who's going to replace him? It'll be Kyron Lacey. It'll be CJ Daniels. It'll be Xavier Thomas. It'll be Chris Hilton. Some of these guys are going to go in the first round of the NFL draft too. Garrett Nussmeier is a good player. It's all going to come down to me. You got to win week one. Brian Kelly struggles mightily out of the gates, and this is not a schedule that sets up for LSU to be able to struggle right away, especially like they start with USC this year. 2 years ago, and like losing those games to Florida State was really the nail in the coffin for some of these. Can they sneak into the Final Four spot? Can they make an SEC title game? But you're looking back 11 weeks ago to when they lost to Jordan Travis and the boys. They bring in Blake Baker, defensive coordinator from Missouri. That is a massive steal. That is huge, especially like if you're not familiar, Joe House is pretty close to Alex Grinch as far as Brad calls them being a slap. And Joe House might be above Alex Grinch as far as that goes. But this is a defense like Harold Perkins finally gets to play in position. That's going to be huge. Major Burns is the worst name for a defensive back in the entire country, but he could play. And so that is huge. Dude, he's kind of changed his name. Like, how can you be named Major Burns playing safety? That's tough. We'll see. None of these, like, they were able to retain some guys in the portal that in years past might have left. It's year 3 of Brian Kelly. Let's see how this thing goes. We'll get into money making time later, but Brad, we always say death taxes and Brian Kelly covering his win total before the season. If Vegas sets this thing at 11.5, LSU's winning 12 games. If they set it at 9.5, they might win 10. LSU wants to make the college football playoff. It's going to be tough in this conference. It's all like, if Nussmeier can play, that's awesome, but you can't let everybody score 35 points a game on you.
Mississippi State's an intriguing team here.
Skip.
It's going to be interesting, right? I mean, another rebuild. It didn't work last year after the tragic passing of Mike Leach. They just kind of kept everything in place. And I'm forgetting the coach's name now off the top of my head, but it was, oh, we want to run things differently. We have a different philosophy. Well, it just didn't work. 5-7, 1-7 in conference. It did not look good. So what do? They go out and get Jeff Lebby, a guy who's been waiting for his opportunity. He was coaching under Lane Kiffin as the offensive coordinator, spent last year with Oklahoma. But Tyson, Blake Shapen's coming over from Baylor. Is there anything to be inspired about there? That's the question mark. And then I'm just going to run through this quick because, this shouldn't be any surprise. 105th in returning production, 20.3% of their offensive yards back. That's 123rd in the country. 34% of their tackles back. That's 123rd in the country. And only 67 offensive line starts back, 83rd in the country. This profile sets up for a disaster. Then you combine a 16th toughest schedule. Oof, I think it's going to be a tough year for Mr. Lebby.
Yeah, and we know Jeff Lebby can get some high-powered offenses going. Like, for all intents and purposes, Brad, this isn't even, really year one. This is kind of like, hey, man, whatever happens this year happens. Just get some guys in the building that want to play for you, that want to do this. This is we say all the time, the cover's not necessarily bare. It's pretty damn close as far as it goes for Mississippi State. Some of these dudes they're bringing in are on their second and third transfers. These are guys that couldn't stick it at any programs and now are giving it their final hurrah here at Mississippi State. This won't be your Dak Prescott teams. This won't be some of your Mike Leach teams. This is going to be a really bad team in the SEC, and I don't think it has any impact on the way that I feel about Jeff Lebby. They could win 0 games this year. I'm going to have the same opinion of them at the end.
Missouri, this was a team we were super high on last year, mainly because we love Eli Drinkowitz. And now in his 5th season, he's 28-21 here. This was a disaster before he took over. I mean, this was not the Missouri team that first came over in the SEC and was competing for championships. They fell off a cliff, and he's gotten them back. This offense is kicking. They're starting to recruit well. Brady Cook is back for his senior year, 3,300 yards last year, 66% completion percentage, 21 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Tyson, they are 36 in returning production. Off their high-powered offense last year, 75.7% of those yards are back. That's 25th in the country. Defensively, I get a little concerned here. There was not a good defense, and 55.1% are back, 82nd in the country in terms of returning tacklers. Their tackle percentage, they have 107 offensive line starts, 33rd in the country. That's a great sign for me. If you can win shootouts, you at least give yourself a chance. That's how I see them attacking this. But Tyson, they have the 62nd toughest schedule according to Phil Steele in the country. It's a gift, man. 11-2 last year. They beat Ohio State in the bowl game. It's setting up that Missouri's going to be here for a while. They're going to start contending for the SEC. It's kind of crazy to think about.
Well, Missouri heard you talking shit when you said that Auburn might have the best receiving room in the country because they have the best player in the SEC in Luther Burden. And that's not hyperbole. It's not exaggeration. He might not be the first wide receiver off the board in the NFL draft. He's going to put up crooked numbers this year. We know Brady Cook's not afraid to sling that thing around the field. And when things get tough, pressure's on, just throw it up to Luther. That's how they're going to play. Some of these guys like Theo Weiss kind of get swept on the rug. Mookie Cooper kind of gets swept on the rug. Marquise Johnson gets swept on the rug. They're really good players too. Defense, that they're in a transition phase right now. But if the offense can carry them through the first 6 weeks as the defense finds their footing, the way that their schedule sets up, you might be looking up at this thing and going, oh, wow, Missouri actually has a chance to play in the SEC championship game. And Missouri has a chance to play in the college football playoff. And if you were watching last year going, yeah, well, they were 11-2. Eli Drinkowitz was 17-19 before this season started. And 17-19 at Missouri, we were sitting here a year ago being like, it's pretty good. For the situation he took over, I'm excited for him to just say dumb shit at all the press conferences, let out whatever made-up sayings he wants to let loose when they're standing on the stage collecting trophies. I expect really good things from this Missouri football team this year. College football is about coaches, man. It is, it has been, and it always will be, and I think Eli Drinkowitz is a good one.
Oklahoma. First year in the Brent Venables. Disaster. Last season, pretty good. 10-3, lost the bowl game, so they had an opportunity to win 11 games. 16-10 in his tenure. It was Jekyll and Hyde in the first and second. Dylan Gabriel was here last year. Yeah, I think that was a big boost for what they want to do under Lebby. They kind of were over the Gabriel thing, right? They were leaning towards Jackson Arnold. Their sophomore They love what he was looking like last year. Just didn't think he was ready. They think this kid's really special, and he's going to shred it up. 38th in returning production. Offensively, though, they're going to have some work to do, or they need some people to step up. 42% of their yards are back. That's 81st in the country. Again, Gabriel's gone. You kind of expect that. But Venables, the longtime defensive coordinator at Clemson, he's returning 80.4% of his tackles from last year. That is 10th in the country. And if you're going to run a sophomore who has no experience really out there in this SEC gauntlet, 114 offensive line starts, that'll help. It's 25th in the country. He should be able to run the football. He should be able to protect. And I think with a defense under Venables who has experience under his system, that's going to allow them to stay in games. How many games are they going to be able to win? That's going to be decided by Arnold. 17th toughest schedule in the country doesn't do him any favors either.
Well, it's like one of those things. They bring in a new defensive coordinator, Zach Alley, this year, and it's like when people talk about a new defensive coordinator for Chris Kleiman or whatever, I don't care. This is Brett Venables' defense. They're going to be just fine. You get the defensive coordinator title. I get all the responsibility. You get fired. I don't. At the end of this whole thing, the thing that would give me some pause here with Oklahoma is they scored 40 points a game last year. I'll bet everything that I have that they don't match that total this year in the SEC. They needed all those points to get to where they got to. There were some very tight games that they found themselves in, or games where they had to score quickly and score in a hurry. And Dylan Gabriel is he's one of the better players of the last 5 years at doing that. I think Jackson Arnold is a good player. This is a different level than the Big 12. And we say that kind of thing all the time and kind of tongue in cheek sometimes, but it's different. One thing that I like about Venables is he spent all that time at Clemson. He took away the good things from Dabo, but he was not been afraid to enter the portal himself and kind of scoop some guys. You mentioned all the offensive line starts. Some of those are the dude from North Texas and the dude from SMU that he got to come over. They're going to start right away, and that's going to be a huge boon. I do have some concern that, maybe some of the reason Brett Venables was an awesome defensive coordinator was because he had awesome players the entire time he was at Clemson. It was a joke year one for him. They win 6 games. They're having open tryouts halfway through the year. Was that him just resetting the culture? Yeah. Is it fixed? We'll find out, because it's easy to score 40 points a game in the Big 12. You cannot do it in the SEC.
Well, a team that's been doing it is Ole Miss, and that's, because Lane Kiffin, I mean, he's certainly a lightning rod with what people think of him, but the guy can coach football, and this is his 5th season here, and he's 34-15. I mean, considering where Ole Miss is historically, it's pretty impressive. 11-2 last year, beat Penn State in the bowl game. That was tough. We had a lot of guys sitting out, but Jackson Dart is returning. What a year he put together last year. 3,300 yards, almost 3,400, 65% completion percentage, 23 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. And they are getting a lot of these guys back. 13th in returning production, 72% of their offense back. That's 30th in the country. Now, the concern is the defense, 42.2%. That's 112th in the country. But, Tyson, they have the most offensive line starts in the country coming back with 222. This is going to be a high-powered offense. They're going to put up a ton of points. They attack the transfer portal. That's what they do under Lane Kiffin. So if they're going to try to plug and play, we got some issues, this and that, they went and got guys. Can they gel immediately? Well, the good thing for them, they have the 40th toughest schedule in the country, a ton of winnable games. If they're not in the college football playoff, this is going to be a disaster.
Yeah, I think it's a disappointment if they're not in the top 12 at the end of this year. I actually kind of liked what I saw a little bit, especially towards the end of the season from Pete Golding and this defense. Like, the statistical jumps aren't very big, but like we see this all the time in that it just looks a little bit better at the end of the season. Then all of a sudden, that's when the next step takes place, is when you go to the next season and you go from tier 2 or tier 3 or wherever you are and you make the jump all the way up to the next one. It's the same song and dance for Ole Miss as it is every year. We know the offense is going to be good. We know Jackson Dart is probably going to get an invite to New York City for the Heisman Trophy ceremony at the end of the year. We know the wide receivers are good. Like, we know about Juice Wells. I think that the Quinshon Judkins thing, losing him to Ohio State, it was shocking, and everyone was kind of like, okay, this is the Kevin Durant of college football. This is a very weird move. They'll be fine. Like, they got Bentley the fourth, I believe, is the running back that they have. But they have tons of dudes, and running backs look really good playing for Lane Kiffin. Like, what's his name? Played for the Rams. Or just got drafted to the Rams last year. He's got dreads. Whoever it was, that kind of proves my point that I can't even think of the dude's name. And Lane Kiffin's turning this guy into an NFL player. There are some valid concerns with this defense. The offense has to be able to carry them. And the momentum that they gained from last year has to be able to carry them to a top 12 season, because the excuse doesn't fly anymore of, well, it's Ole Miss. They won 10 games to start and then lost when it mattered. Now you just got to get in. Anything can happen. Lane Kiffin deserves something. I think college football deserves Lane Kiffin.
South Carolina. Last year it seemed like they could take a step. They finished 5-7, 3-5 in conference. Spencer Rattler was good for them, and they just could not get over the hump. Now you're entering the season with Lenora Sellers, a redshirt freshman. There's excitement around them. But again, redshirt freshman, we'll kind of see. It's not like this is the most talented team in the world. Shane Beamer's in his fourth season, 20-18. It's actually pretty impressive what he's done here at South Carolina, considering the mess that it was.
Big wins
under the previous guys. Yeah, big upset wins. 83rd in returning production. Offensively, they're going to be in some trouble. Only 14.4% of their yards are back. That's 129th in the country. Now, how can you impact things? Well, you can keep it close on defense. 79.6% of their tackles are back. That's 11th in the country. Plus, they're going to be fairly solid in the trenches. 118 offensive line starts. That's 22nd in the country. Does that buy them time to be able to build this offense, to be able to start figuring things out, put some stuff together, maybe squeak out some wins while the defense is carrying? And then later in the season, when they get more experience, then they kind of gel and start being able to do some upset bids like they've done in the past. We'll see. There's just not a lot of talent in this program. That's the issue. It's a lot of dispersion across the SEC, and not a lot of it's going to South Carolina. They played the 32nd toughest schedule in the country. Okay, it's not hard, it's not easy, it's not a gift, it's not a curse. It's just South Carolina football. They're a middle of the road SEC team.
Yeah, and they bring in Raheem Sanders. I'll call him Rocket when he earns the name back. He had a very poor year, I thought, last year at Arkansas. I actually think he's a really good player, but I do think that this is a kind of a case of like, well, the reputation is really good, but the player on the field didn't look like the player on the field that we were expecting a year ago. The defense switched to a 3-3-5 like in November last year, and I think that helped. But it's just a weird configuration to have recruited for a completely different style of defense and then now be running this thing. So let's see kind of where they fall this year. But they almost got Spencer Rattler killed last year. And I don't know if the offensive line is going to be any better. And that's kind of the concern that you have when you're trotting out a guy with like explosive potential and no experience, because maybe we're not going to get to see the explosive potential. I think South Carolina finishes very close to the bottom of this conference, but I don't think that means Beamer's on the hot seat.
Speaking of explosive potential, Tennessee, what Josh Heupel's done since taking over has been remarkable. This is his fourth season. He's 27-12. Had the fantastic year with Hendon Hooker a couple years ago. Then last year went 9-4. Anytime you're going to go 9-4 with Joe Milton, I know he's like a darling on social media, and
yeah,
people
he
are
had
like,
a good preseason game.
Oh my God, it's crazy. The guy can't play. I'll just put it that way. But there's a lot of expectations on Nico Iamaleava to come in here. It looked really good in the bowl. 5-star kid, tons of pedigree. There's a lot of excitement surrounding him. And if he's the next guy here, under Heupel's offense, and you get a couple more years, there's going to be an opportunity for Tennessee to maybe compete for for an SEC title. I don't know if it's going to happen this year or not. They're 90th in returning production. Offensively, they only have 34.1% of their yards back. Defensively, 51.9% of their tackles are back. They do have 112 offensive line starts returning. That's a positive for me. Allow the offense to develop under Heupel. Allow him to just buy time and draw some stuff up so that Nico can find some stuff if he really is the guy. That's the thing here. We got to see. It's a young quarterback in a conference that is tough, and a conference that's going to challenge him. But Tyson, 52nd toughest schedule in the country here for Tennessee. They definitely got a gift there.
So they went 9-4 last year, and they only averaged 24 points a game in SEC play. And I think that those two things sound counterintuitive, or they don't make sense when they go together, especially when you talk about a Tennessee team. Dude, James Pierce is one of the best edge rushers in all of college football. Like, this dude is awesome. 10 sacks a year ago. All this defense has to do this year for Tennessee to have a shot at the playoff is turn the ball over. Just force turnovers and get the ball back to this kid. If he's as good as social media has led us to believe, if he's half as good as we're supposed to think he is, Tennessee's in a really good spot. We love watching Tennessee play football. We love the way the offense works. Like, anytime you can get just crazy motions and you're moving an entire bunch at the same time and all of these fun sprint outs and all these things, that, like, yeah, Joe Milton was doing them, but then he was throwing the ball 70 yards over somebody's head, and you guys were all focused on how far he could throw the football. I think that Tennessee is in a good spot this year to make some noise. And how weird is it that to talk about 2023 as a down year for a Tennessee football team that won 9 games?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. You know, they would kill for that. Like, what, 5-10 years ago? That would have been, they would have thrown a parade for that.
Yeah, like right before Hendon Hooker showed up, they would have literally sold their firstborn to win 9 games.
Moving into Texas, great season for them last year. 12-2, 8-1 in conference. This is their first season in the SEC. Pretty much started this whole super conference thing. Them in Oklahoma decided to jump to the SEC. Sarkisian's here for his 4th year, 24-14 during his tenure. You know, it was rocky at the beginning. Has the ship righted? Have they finally gotten the recruits? You know, he recruits at a high level. Like, there are legit dudes here in Texas. It hasn't been that way for a long time. And they get a boost with Quinn Ewers coming back. 3,400 yards, 69% completion percentage, 22 touchdowns, 6 picks last year. Another guy who could potentially go top 5 in the NFL draft. You know, he's super talented, throws a really good ball. The question I have about Texas is on the interior of the defense, some things on the edge, and then they lost a ton of – you lost C.J. Baxter, their running back, to injury. He's out for the season. You know, Tyson will kind of go a little bit more in depth with that. But already before that, 54th in returning production. Offensively, only 49.7% of their yards are returning. They take out Baxter. That's the problem. 60.2% of their tackles are back, 56%. Now, the good news is 123 offensive line starts are back. If it was lower, I mean, if they were struggling on that front, I think this would have been a complete paper tiger. But if you're going to be able to hold up in the trenches, at least on the offensive line, Sarkisian's going to be able to find a way to get Quinn Ewers to make plays. Like, that's just kind of the reality. That's what we've seen. 36 toughest schedule, nothing that really blows you away there. So it just comes down to, can they hold up in the trenches? Are they going to be able to make enough plays on offense for me?
Yeah, they lose Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. And those are 2 of the better players on the defensive line in the country last year, like 2 guys that go very highly in the NFL draft. And so losing those 2 is huge. One thing that I'd say about this Texas team, like, without even getting into the X's and O's of actual football, Oklahoma is very lucky they exist, because this is the one that is circled on every I'm doing air quotes for the people that are audio listening, real SEC team, just the same way that A&M was circled for their first 5 or 6 years in conference. It's like, yeah, we got to welcome them to the show. Like, welcome to the big show. And that's what I expect a little bit for Texas this year. I know everybody's very high on them. Brett, are we like pretending that Washington looked really good in the game that they beat Texas in last year? Because that was one of the worst performances this Washington offense had. And I know it's a different team. Quinn Ewers is very streaky, and when he is on, it is electric, and he beat Alabama, and that's fantastic. It's a little different without A.D. Mitchell. It's a little different without Xavier Worthy. We think Isaiah Bond, as I mentioned earlier, is going to come in and have an impact. We think Silas Bolden will be good from Oregon State. They steal a tight end from Bama. Steve Sarkisian is well acquainted with this conference, and this conference is well acquainted with him. I'm very curious to see that the way they get treated. I think this might be tough. I think Malik Muhammad's a really good corner. I don't think it's a very good pass defense. I think Anthony Hill Jr. is a really good linebacker, one of the better ones in the country. I don't think that group is necessarily separating themselves from anybody else in the SEC. But if we take the logo off the side of the helmet and we replace it with a Missouri M, they're projected to finish 6th in this conference instead of 2nd, like the odds are saying. I think they're closer to Missouri than they are to your Georgias, and I think that's going to be a rude awakening for Texas. Their TV network, dude, they fucked up all of college football because they wanted more money. As far as I'm concerned, Texas can go 0-15 in the next 10 years.
I also love it, too, how people are like, you know, Texas is a better program than Oklahoma when that's just not the case.
It's
like
not
historically,
true.
Oklahoma is like the way better program.
Dude, I'm 28 years old, and there was like a solid 6-year stretch where Texas was a better program, and that was like early middle school for us.
It maybe even not that many years too. It might have just been 3 or 4. Like it's crazy. Texas A&M, let's stay here. You know, talk about being pissed off about Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC, more specifically Texas. I mean, A&M had to be furious, dude. But it's a new era. No, gone is the Wicked Witch of the West, Jimbo Fisher, and you bring in Mike Elko from Duke. And the reports coming out of campus, it's just a completely different environment down there. Like, it's buttoned up. Yeah, it's buttoned up. Like they're having fun. You know, like they're serious, but they're having fun. Like it's just the whole thing right now. I think it's a good long-term hire. I'm curious to know what happens this season because the whole thing, man, Connor Wigman is a great prospect. 5-star kid, goes down there, and he just can't stay healthy. 4 starts last year. You know, looked pretty electric doing it. Almost threw for 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, 2 picks, 70% completion percentage. Is he going to stay on the field? Can they protect him? Yada, yada. It's the same questions every single year. 56 in returning production. Offensively, 61.8% of their yards are back. That's 46 in the country. I'm not too concerned about this. 44.8% of their tackles are back, which is 105th in the country. I think that's a good thing for Elko. Just give him a blank slate and you just kind of do it and build it and go from there. By the end of the year, it's probably going to be a better unit than it was coming in. So that's not a concern for me. I mentioned protecting Wigman. 112 offensive line starts. That's 28th in the country. That's a damn good start. Like, you got to protect this kid and keep him upright. If you struggled last year, which they did in spots, at least you have more experience. Let's just put it that way, be on the positive side of things. 33rd toughest schedule. Again, not great, not soft. It's just kind of one of those SEC schedules. I think there's a chance that Elko can make some noise in his first year. I'll just put it that way. But I would not be shocked if this thing is going to take a little while to rebuild too.
No, and it's one of those, this doesn't make any sense when I say it out loud, but in my brain, this is absolutely correct. Mike Elko got a lot out of less talented Duke teams playing against good teams in the ACC, and he was able to beat teams he wasn't supposed to beat, and he was able to get Duke sniffing around top 25s. Now he gets to play with like these crazy new toys that he hasn't had access to, and let's see how he kind of trots them out. Adam Cushing needs to get more from this offensive line because if we get robbed of Wigman's entire college football career because he's always on the bench, that's just unfair. But the defense wasn't the problem with Texas A&M a year ago until they played good teams. But that's been true since Kevin Sumlin. And so that went through the Sumlin years, that goes through the Jimbo years, and it might just go through the Elko years. And Elko is a fantastic defensive coach. How many times we got to say there is stink all over College Station, and like you got to cleanse this thing. We need sage. We love Elko. This is where men go to die. Texas A&M is going to win 6 games. They're going to win 7 games. They're going to win 7 games, and then he's going to get fired.
Oh, my God. That is blasphemous. Well, when Tyson's coming back here and he's like, I told you Elko was going to work, I'm pulling this tape.
Dude, I love Elko. I want him to work. I also just, like, this is A&M, brother. Like, we do this with them all the time.
I see what you're doing here. You're playing both sides of it. So when it doesn't work, you're like, see, I told you. And when it does work, you're like, no, I love the guy. I told you.
I loved him.
You're taking a page out of my book.
Yeah, I'm learning.
Let's close with Vandy. And, man,
let's just skip.
I'm going to say this off the top. I really like Clark Lee. Like, he's just such a good guy. I can't believe they're 9-17 since he's taken over. Let me put it that way. This is his 4th season here. Now the problem is whenever they get in the conference, they get smoked. I mean, 0-8 last year, 2-10. But I mean, this isn't a good football team, man. They haven't been. It's crazy. But they get Diego Pavia in. How is he the best quarterback since who that they've had in this program? I mean, holy smokes! Now he's transferring in from New Mexico State. So again, we're going to say it again this way. When you step up in class, how does it look? We'll see. But he's a playmaker. He can run around. He's easily been the best quarterback they've had in a while. I mean, I can't think off the top of my head. Maybe, I mean, seriously, is it Jay Cutler?
That's all I got too. I had to Google Vanderbilt quarterbacks to try to get a list because all I got is
it's got to be Jay Cutler. But if this is going to be the year, they kind of have to do something. Clark Lee's taking over defensive play calling again, which I think is smart. He's like, let me just do this, and let me just hand off the offense to somebody else. Now, they're 59th in returning production. Offensively, they only have 21.4% of their yards back. Just, it's tough. 122nd in the country on that front. 67.8% of their tackles are back. That's 34th in the country. I think that's a good sign for Lee as he's kind of running through this defense. Now, finally, 121 offensive line starts, 20th in the country. Now, they're going to get pushed around a little bit in the past, but Tyson, you need experienced guys up front if you're going to compete in this conference, and Vandy finally has it under Lee. But then, of course, with all these positives, they have the 14th toughest schedule in the country, because why would they ever do anything nice to Vanderbilt?
No, and like it's just weird to look at your coaching staff and go, we should just get all the guys from New Mexico State. Like, let's get Jerry Kill in here as an off-field helper. Like, let's get Tim back in here. It's very interesting. Brad, Vanderbilt has a nepotism problem because I'm going back through this list, and we got Jordan Rogers on here, Aaron Rodgers' brother.
Yes.
You got Steven Rivers, Phillip Rivers' brother, and then you got Kyle Shermer, Pat Shermer's son. So they just are looking for somebody who's related to anybody with solid talent. So we need to figure out who Pavi is related to. That might be this whole thing. Langston Patterson's a good player. That's really all I got for Vanderbilt. Like, he's a good linebacker. It's going to be really tough. We want Vanderbilt to be good. Everybody in the country, I think, would enjoy a 8-win, 9-win Vanderbilt team. It'd be much like the 9-win Indiana season under Penix, where everyone's kind of like, hell yeah, like, this is awesome. It's just not going to happen, folks, and it's unfortunate. Is it weird to say that Clark Lee shouldn't be fired no matter what happens, like, for the next decade? He's the only one that wants to be here.
Right. He's like, talking about, we're going to win the SEC here. I'm like, dude,
you got to beat Hawaii.
If you're the only one believing that, like, man, I think we just got to give you a lifetime job.
But it was fun betting the overs to start the year last year. Vanderbilt was putting up a bunch of points. So maybe there'll be some fun stuff for this offense this year. But every year under Lee, they've been the worst defense in the conference. And it's not his fault. It's a talent discrepancy that is as wide as the Rio Grande. And it's just not going to get closer.
All right, well, that does it for our previews. As promised, here we are in Money Makin Time. So what we're going to go do is our win totals. We're going to pick the conference winner, starting with mine. And that, of course, is Georgia plus 180. I can't believe we're getting this number here on FanDuel. They're the best team in the country. They have potentially the best quarterback in the country. Kirby Smart is going to have this defense fired up, and they have the luxury of being able to play the underdog mentality card after they got screwed in their mind last year and of not making the playoff, felt they were the best team. And then, oh, what do you know? We lose one game and you guys won't let us defend our championship. They're going to be hunting that thing all year. I'm taking them plus 180.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's disgusting. And actually, Brad, if you don't mind, I'm just going to jump right into my Georgia over 10.5 play here, just because it kind of goes together. Folks, they're going to kick the shit out of Clemson on August 31st. It is written in the stars. We know this is going to happen. And then you get Tennessee Tech, and then you get Kentucky, and then you got to go on the road to Kalen DeBoer in Alabama. That is scary. But then it's Auburn, Mississippi State. You're going to kill Texas. You're going to beat out of Florida. Ole Miss is going to be a tough game again on the road. And then it's Tennessee, it's UMass, it's Georgia Tech. 4 years ago, we would have looked at those road games and said, I don't know if Georgia can do it. We have the data now. Kirby Smart is going to have those dudes believing whatever he wants them to believe. Like, he can tell them, he could walk in there tomorrow and say 9/11 was an inside job, and Carson Beck's going to give the craziest interview you've ever heard. These dudes are going to kill everybody.
All right, jumping into my first win total, I'm going to take a shot here on Missouri over 9.5 at plus 146. Kind of went through everything. It's an easy schedule, 62nd easiest in the country. Let's start this way: 4 games at home: Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, Vandy. Then you get a bye. Then you go at Texas A&M. We don't know how good they're going to be. Okay. So let's say they lose there. That would be a tough one. They got to go on the road, but after the bye, maybe not. At Massachusetts, and you
that's so funny
to face Auburn. That's homecoming. Now Auburn's off a bye; they pretty much are too, playing against Massachusetts. Then you got to turn around and play Bama. That's tough, but it's not Nick Saban. New era, yada yada. You get the bye week, then you finish Oklahoma at home, at South Carolina, at Mississippi State, 2 teams that could be a disaster. and then home against Arkansas to close, who might be on their offensive coordinator coach. Like they might not have a head coach anymore. So I'm going to take a shot on this. I think they're a really good football team. I hope the defense improves, because if that's the case, they're going to easily hit this, and they'll be in the CFP.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I have the same play in the slip right now. Missouri over 9.5. You ran through the schedule. They just, if they win one of these games, when they're playing Oklahoma, when they're playing Bama, when they're playing A&M, we're there. And I think they're going to win more than one of those.
I'm going to go to Ole Miss over 9.5. So 2 9.5s here. That's minus 110. Similarly, this offense is going to be ridiculous. And if they can mesh things together with all the talent that they brought in, this Ole Miss team should easily win 10 games. And the concern that you have is, Lane Kiffin finds ways to lose big games and all that good stuff. But host Furman, host Middle Tennessee to start. You go at Wake Forest. That should be a win for Ole Miss. Then you go home against Georgia Southern, host Kentucky for homecoming, at South Carolina, at LSU. Now, that's tough to start. But let's say you get through it. Let's say you just lose to LSU. You get one loss there. You get your long-awaited bye. Then you play home against Oklahoma, at Arkansas, home Georgia. Now, the Georgia game is going to be tough. But then you get to get bye and close on at Florida, home Mississippi State. 2 losses here. That's 10 wins.
They finally figured out how to beat good teams a year ago. I'm in the same play here with you. Ole Miss over 9.5. Like the game against LSU last year was kind of like the start of you started looking around and going, oh, they didn't mess this up. Like they just played all the way through the game and they ended up okay. They tried, but they were able to hold on there. And I think Ole Miss is playing in the college football playoff as well. I mean, at this rate, if they're not, we got a problem.
So I only have 4 plays in the SEC. So this is my third one here. I'm going to take Mississippi State under 4.5. I just think they have not enough talent in this program right now. You bring in Oklahoma, who looks, the arrow's pointing up. You bring in Texas, whose arrow is pointed up, ready to the point where they were in the CFP last year and are trying to get back for back-to-back years. The conference has gotten better. The conference has gotten deeper. The conference has gotten more talented. Meanwhile, Mississippi State's on their second coach in 2 years. They've gotten rated because of that. It's going to be a build for Jeff Lebby. I think they may be able to compete and sneak up on a couple teams, but winning 5 games to me would be a shock. So under 4.5 at minus 148.
I think like if the same Mississippi State roster existed in the Big Ten, they'd be minus 220. Like some of those lines over there for those 4.5 win teams. I think it's kind of a blessing to get it at minus 148. It's weird to say blessing and be talking about gambling in the same sentence. My next one here, Brad, and I have to do it. It's just a principal play. I'm taking Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers over 9.5. I know that's too many teams to win more than 10 games in the SEC. But we talked about it a little bit before the show. They beat USC week 1. This thing is wrapped. If they lose to USC week 1, they're in big trouble. But the schedule goes USC, who go check out the Big Ten preview for see how we feel about them. And then it's Nichols at home. And then you're going to go play South Carolina. Then you're going to play UCLA. And then you're going to play South Alabama. You should be 5-0 at that point. Then you catch Ole Miss at home. Then you go on the road to play Arkansas, battle of the boot. You go to A&M. They never lose to A&M. It took a 7 overtime game where the game was over. Devin White intercepted the ball. Both feet were in bounds, whatever. And then you catch Alabama at home. Then you go play Florida, Vanderbilt, and then you end with Oklahoma at home. Brad, one thing I want to mention to all the people, there's a lot of TBDs for the time next to these LSU home games. That's because if they're good, they're playing at night, folks. And when you walk in, it's a different thing, Oklahoma, when you walk into LSU at night versus the middle of the day. If they catch Ole Miss at noon, Ole Miss is smoking them. If this game is at 7 p.m., I got LSU. So we got to just hope that the time gods are on our side. Plus 205, too. I mean, back-to-back 10-win seasons. Let's be respectful.
Last one for me here. Texas under 10.5 at minus 178. Little juicy. I think they win 10 games or less. I mean, that's what the odds are telling you. Again, 70 cents is pretty much is kind of factored in as a win. Let me look at the schedule here. So they start with Colorado State. It's a win. At Michigan, man, I was thinking that they're just going to go in and push or, beat Michigan. But without Baxter and without the 2 hogs on the inside who were just eating things up last year on the interior defensive line. Could Michigan just have like 5,000 yards rushing? Like, are they even going to have to throw the ball? So that could be a win that I didn't even think about. Okay, you play UTSA, who's going to be a really good group of 5 team, but UL Monroe, nothing there. Mississippi State there. So all right, so maybe you start 5-0. Good start. Red River rivalry. I don't care how good Texas is. They always find a way somehow to lose to Oklahoma. It's a joke. The fact they lost last year was insane. And this year they could do it again. I mean, honestly, I would not be shocked. So after that, then you have to play Georgia. Okay, well, there's a loss right there. So even if let's say you lose back-to-back, Oklahoma, Georgia there, well, you just won your ticket. Okay, let's say you beat Oklahoma, you lose to Georgia. At Vandy, you probably win. You get a bye. You host Florida. Should win that game. Got to go to Arkansas. Then you host Kentucky. Then you go at Texas A&M. You're banking on them losing at least one of those games or to Michigan. I think it's a play here. Let's say Texas gets banged up. You talked about it before. The depth that you need to compete in the SEC is much different than the Big 12. I'm not sure if Texas has it yet to this level. To price them in here at 10.5 to me seems a little premature. Don't care what they did last year in that conference. I don't care they have Quinn Ewers. This to me is a scheduling depth thing.
Yeah, no, I'm on the same play with you here. Texas under 10.5. I think that we're cashing this ticket sometime around week 7. Like they're just going to lose too. Like it's a really, really brutal start to a season, especially like it's just a different level of physicality. And we saw that maybe they couldn't hang with a not that physical Pac-12 school a year ago with better athletes on the interior that they have right now. I think Georgia puts them out to pasture, and then we're just kind of cruising from there. My last play in this conference, Brad, and it's the other newcomers. Again, welcome to the show, baby. Oklahoma under 7.5. Let's just run through this for the people. They're going to beat Temple. They're going to beat Houston. They're going to beat Tulane. You're 3-0. I think they're going to lose to Tennessee. And then they got to go to Auburn. And then they got to play Texas. And then it's South Carolina. But then it's Ole Miss. You catch Maine, and that's awesome. And then it's Missouri, Alabama, LSU. That's really tough 3-game stretch. Like you start 3-0, and then you get 3 really hard ones, and then you get 3 easy ones, and then you get 3 really hard ones again. I think that Oklahoma is going bowling, but they're going to be playing in Vegas somewhere like December 24th.
All right. Well, that's Money Making Time. That's the last edition of our conference previews here. We're ready for week 1 now. We hope you guys are too. I don't think I'm adding anything in this one, but Tyson, as we get set and get ready for college football, where can everybody find our plays?
It will be in the Discord app. I Said What I Said is the group name. Say it every week. We got tons of different stuff in there. So it's not just college football. It's not just NFL football. It's not just MLB. It's not whatever you have in your head. Shoot, you throw a dressage bet in there. I don't care. I'll tail. We'll let you right in. It's free. It's a good time. Hop in there. And we got some big plans for the actual football season here. And lines change fast. So when we do these shows in the middle of the week and then an injury hits or whatever, you want to be in the Discord app because we're not going to emergency pod that Jalen Hurts is out for a week. Those things go in the app. So and let us know what you're playing as well.
In the meantime, like, subscribe, and share the show. We say it all the time. Say subscribe. We have a ton of content coming out for you every single week as we get through football season. So if you're listening in podcast form, just hit that little plus button. If you're watching on YouTube, you get a notification every time we put something out. So stay subscribed here. You don't want to miss a thing. And share the show. Share it with your friends and enemy, whatever. Like it doesn't matter. It just helps us out. We're really appreciative of you guys helping us grow and from where we started and to kind of where we're at now. And follow us on socials if you want to. X, Instagram, TikTok. It's the same handle at ISWIS_pod. Hope you enjoyed week 0. Our next college football one's going to be week 1 preview. So stay tuned for that. And we're going to get back into the NFL early next week. So if you're a fan of that as well, we got you covered. So until then, guys, peace.